So there's another layer we need to talk about. And it's one we can't ignore because it's the most obvious one. Race. Because if you've been listening closely, you probably notice a pattern. The so-called enemy in American wars almost always look different than the average white voter. And that's not coincidence. It's the formula. Brown, black, Muslim, Asian, Latino, communist, foreigner. These identities don't get shown as full people. They get flattened into symbols of danger. Let's think about it. During the Cold War, Russians were portrayed as evil masterminds, soulless, atheist robots. During the Vietnam War, the Vietnamese were portrayed as faceless jungle enemies, swarming, silent, subhuman. And then after 9/11, we didn't just go after Osama bin Laden. We demonized an entire religion, and we still are. Because after 9/11, hate crimes against Muslims in the United States spiked by 1,617% in just 1 year. And this wasn't a glitch in the system. It was the system. TV news show ran wall to wall images of bearded men with Arabic names. Politicians threw out terms like Islamofascism and Sharia law, like they were buzzwords from a movie. Every brown or Middle Eastern man became a suspect. Every Muslim woman became oppressed. Every mosque became a potential threat. Like, this is what George Bush said in 2001, and I quote, "You are either with us or you are with the terrorists." There was no in between. No nuance, no room for complexity, and absolutely no room for dissent. And if you're thinking, well, that's just how war works, I want you to ask yourself, why do we always imagine the enemy as someone who doesn't look like us? Because while we've been trained to fear brown and black foreign faces, we've been taught to trust white domestic ones. Let's look at some receipts. Charlottesville, 2017. White supremacists with torches marched through a college campus chanting, and this is a quote, "Jews will not replace us." A protester is murder. You remember what President Trump said, right? He said, "Very fine people on both sides." Now compare that to how Black Lives Matter protesters were treated in 2020. Tear gas, rubber bullets, military helicopters in the sky, armored tanks on American streets. During the summer of 2020, over 14,000 BLM protesters were arrested. Now ask yourself, how many arrests followed the January 6th insurrection that day? Only about 60 at first. No tanks, no mass tear gas, no snipers on rooftops. Even after hours of storming the Capitol, some insurrectionists were calmly escorted down the stairs. Like, you see the double standard. When the threat is white and right-wing, we look for excuses. He's mentally ill. He was just emotional. He had a bad day. But if the same person was Muslim, they'd be called a terrorist before the news even finished loading. If they were black, they'd be dead before they reached the door. This is what I mean when I say the color of conflict matters. Because war, whether it's foreign or domestic, is racialized. Let's go a little bit deeper. The so-called war on drugs, the war on terror, the border wall, all sold to the public using racial panic. Despite making up only about 13% of the US population, Black Americans account for nearly 40% of those incarcerated for drug offenses. Even though white Americans use drugs at similar or higher rates, immigrants, they were branded rapists and gang members, and they still are, because why not? This is what we are now in America. And ICE raids became normalized. Families were torn apart. Children, literal toddlers, were put in cages. And this is a quote from Trump in 2018. And I quote, "They're animals. These aren't people. These are animals." So language like that is how you prep for public for cruelty. It's how you justify violence. It's how you turn policy into punishment. But it doesn't stop at war and policing. It's in our classrooms. It's in our books. It's who gets labeled dangerous and who gets called disturbed. It's like from critical race theory, bans to book censorship, to labeling ethnic studies is un-American. This country wages war on knowledge too. Because the truth threatens the myth. And the myth of a noble, colorblind America, that myth keeps the war machine running. So yeah, when we talk about war, when we talk about enemies, when we talk about security, we have to talk about race, because race determines who gets fear, who gets bombed, who gets jail, and who gets mourned, and who gets blamed. Malcolm X once said, and I quote, "If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing." And ain't that exactly what we're living in? Because the brown countries it resists, they're called terrorists. When black communities protest, they're called looters. When white men storm the Capitol, they're patriots apparently. The FBI's own 2022 domestic threat report listed white supremacist extremism as the most lethal domestic terror threat. But you wouldn't know that from watching the news. This segment's called The Color of Conflict for a reason. Because war isn't just about weapons. It's about narratives. And those narratives are painted with color. Over and over and over again. And if we don't start seeing through that lens, we're gonna keep fighting the wrong people for the wrong reasons in the name of the wrong lies. Stick with me on the next segment.